All right, go ahead, Don.
All right, this is the time of the year when most people call it putting your bees to bed or getting them ready for winter. So I'm going to give you a couple ideas what I usually do. I check, make sure I got queens running or they're bringing pollen. Check for some stores, whether you open the box or just lift the hive up. And rather than me just keep going on, I want to get other people to participate and tell me how they are preparing for their winter and where they at. Because when I prepare for winter in Georgia, it's a whole lot different than if I lived in Ohio and prepared for winter. So each person, if you would kindly just tell us how you are preparing for winter and what you are doing, so we can all kind of get a little bit of ideas on how we can make changes.
Who wants to go first?
Don't be bashful now.
Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know, what is your idea? I know last week you said what your idea on a quilt top board was. What is your idea on like a Vivaldi board or a candy board? That's what I was planning on for my winter preparation.
If your hive has got some weight to it, I don't think a candy board is really necessary. If you think your bees are going to starve, then I would go ahead and put it on there. But now there's different ways you can do it. You can make a fondant type deal. There's another way. Some people call it a mountain camp. What they basically do is put a newspaper over your frames and they put some dry sugar there. What I found works about the best, we run singles. So that we have a hive top feeder on top of a single story box. And if a hive is actually getting kind of light and the weather's starting to get really cold, what we should do is just drop a couple cups of dry sugar in the back of the hive. And that's all we do. But now, if you put newspaper there, you're going to have a super, or you're going to have at least a 3/4 rabbited out for your frame rest, or you don't have enough clearance. You'll have to kind of move the sugar around to level it off a little bit.
Okay.
And the moisture from the bees will actually dampen it enough. Now, there's some people out there will tell you to sprinkle a little bit. I personally have not liked that idea because it seems to, within a month or so, some places gets really hard and the bees can't even use it. But enough of the moisture comes off the bees, it keeps it where they can work it.
Okay. That's it.
All right.
Okay.
Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm a little further north. I'm in Virginia, right on the North Carolina line. And we've got probably another 3 to 4 weeks before we close up for winter. So right now I'm feeding 2 to 1 sugar syrup to kind of bulk them up because we've had a real poor fall harvest for them. So I'm trying to make sure that they've got enough liquid feed in there. And then about the second week of December, we do the mountain camp method. And I've never ever lost a hive in the winter, never. We put newspaper and a 4-pound bag of dry sugar, and then you put a shim around that deep enough to, have room for that sugar in the inner cover and the lid. And you have to go back every 2 weeks or so and check, because one hive will eat every drop and the hive right beside it may not touch it. They call it an emergency feed, but it really isn't. It's kind of a backup feed. If they can fly out and harvest, they do, but that's just there for those sudden cold snaps where they can't go out and fly. They won't expend the energy to uncap and warm liquid honey, but they can go up and get a grain or two of sugar and liquefy it and pass it around. And so it can carry them through a cold snap.
It's up in the hottest part of the box.
And it's up in the highest part of the box, so it also will absorb the moisture from the breath. I'm visiting the grandchildren this weekend, sorry about that. The moisture from the respiration of the bees in the hive, it usually will rise up and hit an inner cover and fall back down on bees. That bee is a dead bee, and so that moisture gets absorbed by the dry sugar, and it just kind of makes it last a little longer, and it seems to work real well for us. Can y'all be quiet? Alyssa. I felt like I had to get louder and louder. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay.
But it works real well for us.
One thing that I kind of found is I call it north of the Mason-Dixon line and south of the Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah.
So I kind of draw that line there, that if you're north of it, be careful feeding liquid sugar, sugar water, 2 to 1. If you live south of it, you can get by a little bit further, a little bit longer. But my general rule is November to February, I try not to do any feeding.
We're the
Now,
same.
November to February, try not to do any feeding. Make sure your hive's in shape before that time. But now, if you have out yards and you run across a couple of hives that are on the verge of starving, what I've found works the best is to get a honey bear and fill it with honey and pull a frame out and just turn it sideways and just run a bead up and down through that frame, and it'll go down in the comb and it'll actually stay there. And by the time you put it back in there, there'll be enough bees on it. They'll fix it or cap it or fix it where it ain't going to go all over. And it seems to do a whole lot better than trying to put sugar water in there and then raising that moisture content inside that hive so much that then you get a lot of moisture kill-offs.
Yeah. We do the same, and if I get a warm day, we'll put some syrup jars out about 40 feet from the hives, and if they can get out and get some on a warm day, because we'll get days that are in the 70s midwinter. And so that you don't put sugar water in the hive, like you said, I'm November till February.
Yeah.
Because wet bee is a dead bee.
That's the main thing why people, I think, are losing bees, because they get worried about the bees and they start putting too much sugar water in there, and you've got all that moisture in that hive, and it's basically gives them a pneumonia and they just die.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will go next. I actually am I'm in Buffalo, New York. So we get some pretty severe winters. For the last 2 years, I've tried the quilt boxes. This will be my second year trying the quilt box to help expel a lot of that extra moisture out of the hive. I've tried the Hive cozies before, and that just holds too much moisture into the hive, so I've stopped using those. I do make up the sugar cakes, so I can put those in there as needed. So I can run out there when it's 20 degrees and throw them in if they're getting light or if it's warming up. Because my biggest concern is them running out of food.
Are you running supers on there, or are you running singles?
Nope, I've got double deeps.
Double deeps? Well, then you should be running at least 6 frames in there of good solid honey capped right now. If you got that in New York, you should be all right.
Yeah, they're pretty well stocked, but come probably April or so, when they still can't fly a lot, they're going to be getting low. So.
Well, every year is going to vary for us. That's what I'm finding. And it seems that the years that we have a more severe weather, longer and lower temperatures, the bees actually come through winter better than a few winters that we've had where the temperature's up, down like a yo-yo. And you get a week of warm weather, the bees are starting to expand out and using up a lot more reserves.
Yep, I've noticed that too.
Yeah, so those are things to watch for.
Yep, okay. All right, next up is Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis.
Well, Don asked about what you do to prepare. I'm up in north central Missouri. I've been feeding heavy syrup for several weeks now. And then just last week, we've turned into, we're probably 28 or 29 right now. Last week, I put on 1.5 inch shims. I've got your hive top feeders on top of all my nukes and hives. And I make a sugar cube. I take 4 pounds of sugar and 4 tablespoons of water and warm my oven up to 350, shut her off, shove it in there, and it comes up nice cakes. And I put 3/4 of that cube over the top of the frames, and they still have ventilation, and they seem to work through all the year and absorbs water. So only thing I got left and I've got behind is I got to get the mouse guards on. And that's done. I'm through for a while.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation, so people in different areas can get different ideas. My ideas might not work everywhere, and maybe you got ideas that's going to work a little better. The main thing is don't load them hives up with all that moisture.
That's right.
Now, some people are doing a fondant with a little bit of vinegar in it to keep it from, I guess, fermenting. So that's another thing that people mention too.
That's all I had.
All right. Let's see. Next up is Mitch. Go ahead, Mitch.
Hey, how y'all doing? Hello, Fat Bee Man.
Hey.
Hey, this will be my first winter.
Mhm.
Okay. Let me explain a couple things off the bat. Number one, I'm in the middle of Texas, so I am in Africanized bee. Okay, big time here. All my bees are feral bees.
Mhm.
Okay, I actually tried to do package bees, and they died off. But my local bees are doing really good, but they are hot, and I mean hot. Okay, I've got one that's a 2 double deep 10 frame, and it's also got a super on it. You take off the super, they get a little testy. I take off that top medium, that top deep, and I mean I'm fully suited, and they are everywhere. I mean, they come out with daggers. Okay,
Well,
so
the
it's
only
really
thing
hard
that
to
you
get
can
to that
do is
bottom.
basically start changing your genetics a little bit. Now,
Well, I
Jim,
did try that. I've tried it 3 times, and I'd get the queen, I'd kill her off, I'd wait a day or two, and then I'd put the new queen in. I'd check to see if they had any
queen cells.
queen cells, and I'd put that queen in, and they would dig her out and kill her. I mean, instantly. It's one time I tried not even taking the corks out and left it 5 days, and then I released her, and they killed her. they they are mean bees. But one other question I did want to ask is I've got the IPM bottom board, the screen board. For wintertime, should I put the IPM board in there so that they stay warmer, or leave it open?
I personally don't use them, you know. Now, Jim is down below where you're at, and, he had basically the same problem. Those bees can be tamed. He's working his bees south of you in shorts. So what I think you'll have to do is either call me, we can talk about it. I would take those hives, I would bust them down really low, 3 frame or 4 frame splits, put a new queen in there, and you shouldn't have no problem. I think what you
Right.
got is too many bees that when you try to change that queen out, there's so much Africanized bee in there. But now Jim can probably walk you through how he's done it, because he's bought nukes from us and he's bought bees from us, and he's never had a problem over there.
Okay, because I've got 3 hives going. My other 2 hives are 8 frame. One's a medium brood chamber, and the other one's a deep.
Mhm.
And as long as I don't build them up, they're fine. I can go in there, and I just wear a veil because I don't want to get stung in the face, but that's just me. But I can go in and play with them. But boy, that other one, it was in my backyard. I had to take it out to a friend's place because when I'd open it up, they'd start chasing the dogs and the neighbors, and I mean, they get really upset. And but they're doing beautifully. That's the I think next year they're going to make me a bunch of honey.
They should
But
make you some honey the first year. If they're not making honey the first year, you have some other kind of an underlining problem.
okay,
Because
because
I've sold packages to people here. I've sold them to people in a lot of different states. And usually if you treat them and take care of them, they make honey and you can split them the first year. One of my students split some of his packages 4 or 5 times, and then he got the packages the end of March and actually made between 3 and 6 gallons per hive, and was splitting them too. So bees do 2 basic things. They multiply and they store honey. Now, in your
right,
situation, I mean, there could be some other things that you're not noticing. Maybe you got old comb. Maybe it's contaminated old comb. That could get those bees a little irritable.
okay.
I don't run
And I'm
comb
using
more than 3 years.
that black. I'm using that black plastic. What do you call them? The frames. But
Yeah.
what I'd rather probably do is go through you and get some actual sheeted wax instead of the plastic. I don't think bees like plastic.
Well, it takes a
I'm
lot of
starting to
people a
become
long time to learn that. I try to tell people to think about the woods. What you find in a tree in the woods, that's what you should use. They don't have screen doors in the beehives or the trees, and they don't have queen excluders and metal and plastic and all this other stuff. So you take a
right.
lot of these little things and add them up, they're going to make a difference, believe me.
Yep. And I've pretty much came to that conclusion. And that's my first year. I mean, so, I mean, I've watched every single video you've ever made, every other video everybody else has made. I did come up with one thing, though. I found on my own, and it might
We're
interest
all full of it, aren't we?
you. Yeah. I had one hive that went queenless, and it started having a layer worker problem. Okay. And I forgive my language, but I've read the bull about shake them out. Okay. You got to take them out 300 yards and shake them out. And what am I going to do? Go in my neighbor's yard and shake the bees out in their yard? That ain't going to happen, right? So I did something, and I wanted to try it because I had an idea. And you know how you have the push cages that you can put in for a queen?
Mm-hmm.
And I made one that was completely across the whole frame, both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I put the queen and her worker bees in there, and I put the frame in there, and I put two frames of brood from another one, and on the outside of them. And lo and behold, I don't have a laying worker problem anymore.
Well,
Now,
what happens is I talked to a fellow about 5-6 years ago, and he said the problem bees are having is communication. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, a lot of people that's running plastic, there's no communication from one side of the hive to the other. Bees don't know what they're doing. They're not passing pheromones, so they're actually causing swarm cells. And it makes sense. And you start looking at what the industry's doing. They didn't come out with plastic for a long time. Then they start punching an 1.5 inch hole in their plastic at each end of the frame. So it must be something to do with it. Bees don't like plastic. No matter how you get them to draw it out, you're lucky. I mean, you need to do what is natural, beeswax, or just let them draw their own comb.
Right. Use a strip at the top and
Or you can use a half a sheet of foundation. Put fishing wire in it if you're going to extract it. We extract here with a 2-inch starter strip, and we let them draw it down. We extract with it. We don't blow it out. But you got to have common sense. We have a hand 20 frame extractor, and we rotate one way. We see honey coming out on the wall. We reverse, go the other way. But these people go out and they don't have no experience. They have a motor on there, and they go from first gear to high gear right away, and it blows everything out. It's like spin dry on your wash machine.
Right. I sit there in awe of you guys, and actually I get kind of upset when I watch you guys out there in your shorts. And if I did that, I'd be in the hospital with the bees I've got.
Get your genetics in your bee yard. Get them calmed down. There's a fellow that buys bees from me in Brownsville, south of Brownsville, Texas, and he told me he wears 2 bee suits, and he started buying my bees about 6 or 7 years ago. And he's out there and he's done videos working in shorts and a t-shirt. He said it's a pleasure to work bees, not sweating out there 90 degrees.
Ain't no kidding, especially out here in Texas. It gets hot. It gets up to 100, But and I'll tell you, I come in drenched after working that hot hive.
Jim Murray's on the chat right now, and you can get his information. He has gone through the same identical thing, and he can tell you it's possible.
Cool.
Jim, do you want to chime in real quick? Hang on. There we go. Can't hear you.
Turn your volume up, Jim.
I don't think he's got his microphone on.
Oh, maybe you don't.
Nope, your mic doesn't seem to be working. Okay.
He's listed on my webpage as DreamWorks. He's down in Wimberley. He's down just below Austin. And there's one up there in Henderson. And there's another student over there in just above Houston by Beaumont.
Okay.
So any one of them can help you.
Cool. And you know, there's not many bee people out here. I got one up in New Mexico. I know of him.
You've got a lot of bee people out there, but they're migratory from up north down there over winter. Then they go out to California.
Ah, okay. All righty. Well, I sure appreciate you listening to me bark for a few minutes.
Well, we learned something.
All right. Next up is Mike Morris. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm down here on the coast, and we still got some goldenrod working, and I've left I haven't pulled any honey, and they're pretty full. So am I okay just to leave that full hive all the way through winter?
I would, anything that, if you're still pulling on goldenrod, anything that you got in there that is sealed, I'd pull out a frame or two, give them a place to work, and put your empty frames or your extracted frames, put them to the outside of the box. Don't put them in the middle or anywhere, you know, 1 or 2 frames in. Try to keep them to the outside, because if you get a cool night, you don't want to divide your brood up. Get a little chill brood.
Oh, okay. So put them to the outside, but
Yeah, you can
that's
put them
what I
to the
was
middle now in the springtime or in midsummer. You can put them in, it'll draw it out faster.
right. I was worried about them not having any place left to put anything and
Yeah.
getting ready to swarm.
Well, if
So
you're running a single deep or are you running a double?
I'm running singles.
Okay, you're running hive top feeders?
Yeah, and I've got 2 10 frames with a little short things on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's full of honey, so I just left it.
I would pull the super off and I would try to run singles with a hive top feeder. And if you're worried about them starving, you can always feed back honey in a hive top feeder. I would give them some room if you got goldenrod. Right now, goldenrod is about finished up where I live. The asters are still running, and there's a few other plants is blooming, but they're just going to get enough to get by. They're not going to make an excess amount of honey right now.
Right. Okay.
But if you're on the coast, I talked to a fellow yesterday from Florida, and he said they're bringing stuff in like crazy down there, but you know, he's 5-6 hours from here.
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds good. That's what I wanted to know, just to make it through the winter.
They'll make it.
All right.
Okay. Anthony, go ahead.
That was quick. Hey, I was just curious. Almost every day, I see someone posting. They say, "My bees are always so calm. They're always calm. But I went out there today. They boiled out of the box, and now I have 50 or 100 stings." Does that ever happen to you, Don? With all the hundreds of hives that you have and you work, do you ever have them come out and go crazy on you out of the blue?
Sometimes you open a hive up, and when you open a hive up, you basically have to learn to read the bees, and that's one thing I try to show students here. Keep an eye on the bees. If you see them all lining up with their eyes up looking at you, barely put a puff of smoke. Keep them under control. What happens is new beekeepers, they see these bees getting a little bit aggravated, and right away they take a step back and they start throwing out a pheromone on their body, and the bees pick up on it right away, and that's when they get stung. The reason a lot of times you work a hive and you could go out there basically with no shirt on and they won't sting you. The next day they're very irritable. Get down and look up underneath the hive. You might have a praying mantis, a little lizard under there. Something is aggravating them. And even in places where you don't have lizards, I've seen possums and coons get out there and scratch the front of the box and actually cause the bees to get more irritable. They get defensive.
Yeah, I see a lot of people post it, and you know, my bees I think are very calm, and then I'm just wondering when I read these things, is my day coming someday? But then I think of like you and JP, and you guys are around hundreds of thousands of bees all the time, and I was just wondering if it ever happens to you where one day they're calm and another day you get tore up.
Well, you can look at, I've done a video and I did a cutout, and I did the cutout for 2 reasons. I was training a student how to do a cutout, and the second thing is I get emails that I work my bees, and my bees know me. So they don't sting me because they recognize me. I took bees out of a house. The bees was in that house 15 years. And the day I took them out is the first time I seen them bees. I went over there like I normally work my bees, and I took the bees out. A lot of times people get stung is they're throwing out a fear pheromone. They're afraid they're going to get stung, and they get stung.
Yeah, and what you said when the bees are looking at you, you go out there and you smoke the hive a little bit and you open it. And then
Wait a minute, you say you smoke the hive, then you open it. That's the main mistake most people do. They smoke the front of their hive, then they open it. That's like smelling a fire in a theater. You panic everybody. They're running for the doors, and you panic the bees.
No, I never smoked the front of the hive. I never smoked the entrance.
Oh, I just misunderstood you. You said you smoke them, then open the hive.
Yeah, I'm saying that other, in general,
Yeah.
people go out there and you smoke the hive, and then you start working on it, and you get so involved in the inspection, you're not paying attention. But then when you look down there, it looks like Kilroy all across the top of every frame. There's all the little faces looking up at you. That's time to give them a little puff to knock them back down.
I usually try to teach the students to puff the smoke on the side of the hive, not directly in the hive, and then watch which way your smoke is blowing. And you want the smoke to come up the side of the outside of the box and just kind of roll across a little bit. It don't take much smoke. I've even worked hives with an unlit smoker. Just the smell of the smoke will move them down.
Yeah.
That's actually, I done a video probably the first or second year of putting liquid smoke on your hands and working bees without a smoker.
Yeah. Okay, I want to let someone else ask some questions here.
Okay, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, it's my turn already. All right.
Back to you.
All right. One of the things from what Anthony was asking. So this is my first year keeping bees. So, whenever I first started out, I wore these heavy goatskin gloves. They were fancy, the whole get up, and I found that they weren't very nice for lifting up frames out of the hive. You couldn't feel, and you was smashing bees, and so I started wearing nitrile gloves. I've done a lot of hive inspections over this year with nitrile gloves, and I've never once got stung. As soon as I took them off to go put a feeder on the top, I got stung. And I wasn't even near the hive. I didn't have it open or anything. I got stung. The second time I did it, I got stung. Is there something to bare skin that makes you get stung, or is it just...
Not really. Not really. Unless you got a fear factor there. I have actually put my chin on a hive, and I got it on some of my pictures on Facebook and that, where I got my chin on a hive, and bees are coming out. And people said, how come the bees ain't stinging you? And they come with gloves and stuff because they're afraid of bees. I said, take your glove and lay it on top of that same hive. And as soon as they got the glove close, the goatskin gloves, they tore that glove up.
Yeah.
Even if you wash it, you can't get that smell out. Okay. I think, if you rub liquid smoke on your hands, you're probably going to do a little better. I think first-year beekeepers always have the fear on them. I could be 200-300 yards from my house working 10 students, have one up by the house that's coming talking about something else, information, and he's afraid he's going to get stung. And he's the one that gets stung, that distance. They can smell fear just like a dog, and they come to you.
That makes sense, because like I said, I can wear nitrile gloves, and I can rip down a double deep and not get stung once. This is my first year. I don't know what I'm doing by any means at all, and I don't get stung. But as soon as I wear bare hands and...
I think it's the fear factor there. It takes usually about 2-3 years of working. If you had your 50 hives out there, I bet you within 2 months you wouldn't even get stung anymore.
That makes sense.
I mean, it sounds silly, but many of the students that's been here, they think they're going to get stung, and they really don't. I mean, sometimes about a week later, they say, what's wrong with your bees? They're not stinging me.
All right. And one more question I had for you. this is something that I've been wondering for a long time, almost since I've been watching you. If you could start over from scratch and become a first-year beekeeper again with just one hive, what would you do differently in the beginning? From what you know now, what would you do differently?
What would I do different now than what I would do, say, 40 years ago?
Yes.
First I would do is I'd find a beekeeper that had a bunch of hives, and I would hope he would show me his tricks and teach me a few things. And I started out with 10 frame stuff. And when looking back, I'd tell everybody, go 8 frame or 5 frame, because bees build up so much faster in an 8 frame than they do in a 10 frame. And at your age, you're going to look like me in another 10 years. You've worked 10 frame stuff because it busts your back down. Especially if you're in an area where you get a good honey flow. You pull 2 deeps off of one hive full of honey, you're talking some weight. And when you get up where you're reaching straight out from your chest, lifting up 140 pounds, then it gets bad.
Okay.
So, right now is a good time to make your mistakes. First year, it takes you anywhere from 2 to 5 years to really get a handle on what's going on, because everything is depending on weather, humidity, and moisture in the air. It all has to do with honey flow, queen production, everything.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Josh, I just wanted to add that I use the nitrile gloves too, mostly because the propolis gets all over everything. When I take those gloves off, there's probably about a gallon of sweat in each glove, and that could be what's triggering the bees.
Okay.
Especially towards your hands. So you might want to try just going in gloveless completely and see what happens.
All right. I'll give that a try next time.
Okay. All right. We got next. Robbie. Go ahead, Robbie.
Hello.
Hey.
You notice sometimes when I inspect a beehive, especially around 5 o'clock or after, I get stung more often during that time frame compared to earlier. Any theories on why?
Is there any truth to that, you mean?
For me, after 5 o'clock p.m., I get stung more often after that time period than 2 or 3 o'clock.
You got office bees then. If you get enough hives, you work usually daylight to dark, and the most of the time you're going to get stung is just about an hour before dark if you're moving bees. But if you're inspecting, you should be done inspecting, usually about 2 hours before dark. But it really doesn't have a whole lot of time framing there. A lot would have to do with the race of the bee you're running. And if you're in a hive that there's no honey flow for, a few days, they're going to get a little more protective.
Okay.
But I don't find one time of the day you get less stings than you do in another time. Most people don't like to work their bees first thing in the morning because they think there's too many bees in the hive. But when you're out there gathering queens up, you start out at daybreak or an hour after daybreak, you're catching queens. So you got the hive at the most amount of bees in it.
I'm gonna do it Italian.
You got to get used to everything. It all comes in time.
I used to wear veil, gloves, and suits, but now I go suitless, gloveless. Yep.
Okay. Good. Any other questions, Robbie?
Oh, I have this nuke box. It's getting full. About 21 days ago, I cut out one comb to give the queen more room to lay eggs. They're not throwing out the comb yet, but there's other frames. They're getting honey bound, and I inspected today. Like, wow, it's heavy.
Well, they're filling up with honey, but when you cut queen cells this time of the year, you might not get your queens mated, So I would kind of hang back on doing your splits and cutting cells out this time of the year.
Okay. I'm like, I haven't inspected for about 14 days. Just giving them a break. I'm feeding them now.
Yeah.
They loaded up over 14 days. I'm like, I think I got new necklace that was stunting.
Everything's always changing. You got to stay with it.
Yep. Mm.
Okay. Next up is Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi. Your earlier question was on winterizing. Let's see. We're in northern Maine here, so we're way above the Mason-Dixon.
A little bit.
Actually, we're probably near the North Pole, closer than the Dixon line.
Got the Royal Mounted Police up there watching for you.
That's right. Only 10 miles away, by the way. No, I got 5 hives. that's what I can manage right now. I've got them all wrapped up with the exterior. My wife calls them hive condoms, the plastic exterior wrap. And I'll put a sugar board on it, the 4-to-1. I haven't put that on. I put that on this week, and then I'll strap them down. And then I'm going to put probably 4 hives in a shed, which will have a controlled temperature and ventilation, with a screened area to allow them to come out but not go wild all through the shed. And we'll see how that works over the next 4 months.
Is this your first year doing that?
Yes.
My experience with people up north that's done that, if you don't have enough ventilation in there, a lot of people in South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, some of them use tar paper to insulate the hive, and then bales of straw around that. And the ones that they don't do that much to seem to do better. They're having a moisture problem. The bees have to breathe, and if you put plastic on them, I think you're going to suffocate them.
I think, well, I'll elevate the top of that, so we'll have enough. I'm pretty sure we'll have enough.
And putting them in a shed, I don't know how that's going to work for you.
I know, that's the challenge. Well,
it might be the same thing as greenhouses. We don't put bees in greenhouses because of all the glass. They can't find their hive.
Right. This is going to be, there won't be any light into this. It'll be, what I'm trying to work on is protect them against that 40 below weather, where you go down to 40 below, then 2 days later you're up to maybe 45 or so, and then they break cluster and it goes back down, and that seems to tear them up. I'm going to leave 1 hive out this year. Now, all the hives this year is the first time I ever treated them for the varroa mites with the vaporizer.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is just to see how they handle. But in the shed itself, it's just going to be a stable temperature, probably be about 35 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. With a humidity, I can control the humidity in there.
If you want to do some experimenting, take one of the hives, instead of putting the plastic in that. I talked to a fellow in Northern Ontario, and he puts 3 rows of heat tape. You know what heat tape is?
Oh, yeah. I thought of that.
You wrap water pipes. They use a lot under mobile homes and people that's got basements that's way up north. They use this heat tape. And he says he's having very good luck with it, but he's not putting them in a shed. See, if bees come out in a shed, you got to keep. Bees have to go through a season. It's just like everything else. They have to go through cold weather, warm weather, the whole life cycle. If they don't, and you start altering it too much, you either going to have bees that starving on you or don't gonna make it at all. Right.
No, I follow you. I'm aware of that. No, the idea there is to keep it. They'll be below. I mean, frankly, it will probably be about 39 to 40 degrees in that shed constant. But on the hives themselves, will have putting a screen enclosure further away from them, so that if they want to come out, they can come out. But they won't be able to go, not like they're going to be able to go outside. And I'll be able to monitor the temperature in there with a remote thermometer, just and humidifier. It's just an experiment on this one. I had them prior years. I've had them outside. I've had varying degrees of success. If they're buried under the snow, they do fine.
Insulation factor.
Insulation factor. Never had a problem. The problem is getting out. You imagine going out about 6 feet of snow and lifting the top off, look at the bees, and
Well, you don't do that there. Most people that are in really cold climates like that, your biggest thing is go out there if you've had snowstorms and make sure that you have an entrance for them to haul the dead out, or
Right.
have a high
right,
upper entrance
right,
where they can at least go out and relieve themselves.
right,
That's the biggest problem that bees in the north have.
right. They'll have both.
Yeah.
There won't be, and then like I said, on the humidity thing, I'll be able to monitor that.
Yeah.
So, it's a gamble. But I figured I could do 4 hives in the shed, see what happens. I'll keep one outside. And we'll get the reports here by,
It's hard to get a good study on that, doing that, because even where you live,
Mhm.
for 5 years in a row, every single year is going to have a different variation of moisture and temperature.
oh yeah, exactly.
So it's not a really hard, other than you can just say, I brought my hives through. That's a good feeling when you can bring them through.
That's the only
Yeah.
challenge. Yeah. I mean, the most surprising one that I brought through was one that I had. It was actually 3 boxes deep. Get this,
Mhm.
two 10-frame deep boxes full of honey and the bees, and then I had above it just an empty box, and they were just semi-wrapped with what you'd normally do with a fiberglass type wrap.
Mhm.
In the trees, surrounded by trees, and they made it through fine through the winter. Now, and I also put a sugar board on them, so they seemingly did fine. They were they got through the winter. So it's a hit or miss. Last winter I had 5, and I had them with the bales of hay and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Adequate ventilation, adequate food, and none of them made it. So I thought, well, I need to take a look at the varroa mite thing. They made it through to January, February timeframe, looked like,
Mhm.
but then they couldn't.
February, they started crashing.
They crashed roughly
Yeah.
early February.
I think it's better. A lot of people don't want to treat, but I think it's better to do your vaporizing with oxalic acid or some means to break that mite cycle,
Yeah.
and get it done before November, because you need to get those winter bees going into winter.
Yeah, that's correct. I finished that up in September. I did roughly 3 treatments over a 7-10 day period, each time. So that looks good. They all look healthy. They all get plenty of food. So
Are you checking with alcohol wash, or how you checking see if you got mites? You pulling drone comb out?
No, I did drone cone earlier. It was nothing. I did the vaporizer with the sticky board underneath. I didn't see anything. I tried once with the sugar, where you put the bees in a powdered sugar, just to see. Nothing I could really determine.
It's
I haven't done the alcohol. I haven't done the alcohol one.
If I was going to, I have never treated or tested my bees, to tell you the truth. Never. I run too many hives. I just look at conditions of them.
Mhm.
But if I was going to check them, I would never use sugar. I mean,
Yeah.
I would use alcohol. But for a beekeeper who's not experienced at finding a queen, I would pull the frame out, find your queen before you ever put any bees in a jar, and then put a little alcohol in there.
Right.
Because most people, they're
right.
looking through a veil, they can't see the queen, and if you get alcohol on that queen, it's gone.
Yeah,
It's
that's
finished.
true. That's true. So that's where we're at this step right now. So we'll see. I mean, it's an experiment, see what. But the thermal, the heat tape option, that's an option for me. I do have power at that location, so something I might be able to operate with.
You have to find what's going to work for you. I mean, there's people in remote areas use solar power things, and they got those heat tapes on them, and they seem to be doing good.
Yeah.
The most sure way to do it is get you an RV and take them to Florida for the winter.
That's what normally happens. That's true.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
I think, Joe May, did you want to add something? I seen you post a sign up.
Yeah, I think all the big producers that put their bees in buildings keep them around 35 degrees. Of course, you got to keep an eye on CO2 levels. If it's too sealed up, that's a big thing.
Right.
That's all I had.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We got Chris Papert. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, my question's for you, Eliza, or even Pat. Are the quilt boards necessary in Pittsburgh area, Pennsylvania area?
Oh, I'll answer first, then let Pat go. Like I said, this is my second year using them. Last year, so they did. I think I had too much quilting material in it, and it was just building up. So this year I'm cutting back a little bit and doing more of a chimney effect, kind of a hole in the middle of the quilting material to see if that will help. I will let you know come April and March.
All right.
All right, Pat, go. Your turn.
Yeah, it depends on what you're going to feed. Like the dry sugar on mine absorbs some of the moisture, so instead of a quilt, you might want to do the foam core board that you can buy at Lowe's for like putting on buildings, and put that up in the roof for some extra insulation up in there. It really depends on what your moisture levels are going to be, if you have problems with the moisture or not. I would think the quilt board absorbs some of the moisture too, right, E?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the idea behind the mountain camp method. I've looked into that a lot.
Yeah, because it absorbs that excess moisture, and then we put a piece of foam core up inside of the lid.
Yep.
Give them some extra insulation up in there.
How about wrapping the hive?
Where are you?
I seen guys wrap them with the 2-inch board, and I seen them wrap them with felt paper. I seen no wraps.
Where are you?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
It's a possibility for where you are. Where I am, I don't wrap. We've got one guy locally that's from Wisconsin, and so he treats his bees like he lives in Wisconsin. He wraps them and heats them, and I don't see a big difference between him wrapping or not wrapping.
Okay.
They come out earlier in the spring if you wrap them because they're kept warmer. So you might not want to keep them too well wrapped and they're too warm and they start spring buildup, and then they come outside and you've got snow. So you kind of have to figure out, what you're trying to achieve, and to make sure that you're looking inside that hive and checking the status. Are they building up too quick? What can you do to slow down the queen laying a little bit? I like the insulation board because you can make it 4 sides and ratchet strap it on, and that seems to do real well. And make sure that you have a north wind block. That's the most important feature in my bee yard in the winter. Because I'm in the middle of a field with no trees and no bushes. I'm in the middle of a cornfield, wide open. And so that wind is killer. And yeah.
Yeah, I built the wind block last week and actually went up to 70 degrees, but they got used to it. But it's cold tonight.
Are you out in the country?
No, we're in an urban area.
Well, if you're in a kind of a build-up area with trees now, you don't have a problem. But when I run bees in Ohio, I was 50 miles south or 60 miles south of Lake Erie in Ohio. And we used snow fence. They run it across road or along the roads for keep drifts down. It don't look like it would do much, but it actually helps the snow build up on the backside of it and acts like a good windbreak.
Oh, there you go.
Hay bales, anything to block that wind. Yeah.
Hey, Dawn, one more question. The one hive, I noticed I did my treatment on both hives at the same time. They did real good. Saw less and less mites until I got down to very few. And then the other day I pulled the board out and the one hive is loaded with them.
Well, the weather's been awful warm. And then you might have beekeepers that's around you that's not treating. I mean, I got a beekeeper less than a quarter of a mile from here, and he does a lot of cutouts. He does removals. So he's bringing bees in, they're loaded. So I treat as anytime the bees are flying, even in the wintertime, I treat.
Just don't treat while they're in a cluster, right? So last anything I've heard.
Well, you can kind of tell. Usually these bees here in Georgia, they're flying between 41 and 43. It's not an ideal time to treat. I like to treat about 55 personally.
Okay. I did. I nailed them yesterday, or last Friday night.
Are you using a vaporizer?
Yep.
You closing the hive really good?
Yep.
Do you have a lot of extra drone comb in there by any chance?
Not really, no.
Okay.
A lot of the drones are laying out in front of the hive right now.
Well, that wasn't the question. Do you have drone comb?
I don't think I do. Last time I checked, I don't think I do.
Sometimes if you have a lot of drone comb in there, you got a lot of drones that are actually a breeding place for your mites.
Okay.
So another thing to do is change out if you're not making queens, you don't need probably a 3-inch square of drones is more than adequate for a hive that you're producing honey with.
Okay. I'll look into it again, but I'll next time.
I did a video on how to check. If you're doing honey, take a dollar bill, fold it in half, and that's about the area of drones you should have for a honey producing hive. If you're doing queens, at least open up a dollar bill and you should have that much drones, whether it's half on one side, half on the other. That'll give you adequate drones. You know, unless you're doing hundreds of drones, then you might have to add drone comb to a hive.
What do you mean add? You mean like add a plastic frame of drone comb?
Add a plastic frame. See, we're doing, you know, like 300 or 400 cells 2 or 3 times a week. So, you know, you can burn out, you know, 25, 30 drones on each queen.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to have too much drones out there than not enough.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Joe May?
You know, they was talking about insulation board. I run 2-inch styrofoam in my hive top feeders, but in that hive top feeder, I've got ventilation all the way around the outside edges and a 2-inch hole coming up from the inside straight up through the styrofoam. And I drill a hole through the styrofoam. And I got my new toy yesterday, thermal camera, so I went out and played with it today. And them bees clustered in a double stack 5-frame nuke. They're clustered in the bottom, and you can see a little thin air line of heat go up, and it hits that styrofoam top, and the whole top's got like a 2-inch band where it holds that heat in on that feeder. So that's the way I've always wintered, but it keeps it from doing the condensation on the bottom of the feeder when I put the 2-inch styrofoam up there. But they're adequately ventilated. I got vent holes in every box, plus the 2-inch going out the feeder. But the thermal image was kind of neat. It showed it hold that heat right up there, put a 2-inch band right across the top of that styrofoam.
Okay. All right. Robbie, go ahead.
When I make this thick syrup, it crystallizes on me sometimes after a couple of days feeding them. Now I have yellow jackets. I'm thinking of changing the drip method. I got one round feeder, has a hole in the middle of it like a donut. Have a couple of marbles inside so the bees don't drown. Got yellow jackets. Fish outside so the bees to clean it up and try to get more syrup.
Are you using a chicken feeder?
And it gave me an idea. If yellow jackets cleaned up for me real good, I'm going to use that as 2 things: yellow jacket trap and to clean my feeders. It's a win-win.
Yeah. That's what we do. Learn little things here.
What can I do to make sure the syrup don't crystallize?
If it's crystallizing, you're not stirring it enough or you're mixing it with not enough water. We don't heat water. We use cold water. But we got a motor on ours, agitate it until it's good and mixed.
Can you give me a recipe?
We do it in a 55-gallon barrel. I mean, we put better than 3/4 of that barrel with dry sugar. Then we add water to it. We got a big blade in there. Actually, it's a lawnmower blade welded to a rod with a motor on it. So we're spinning the distance. It's about 17, 18 inches across inside that barrel.
Can I use a mixer?
Well, you could use a paint mixer. It just takes a little longer. They got a squirrel mixer, and they got one for 5-gallon buckets. I got one out here, but it just takes a lot longer with a hand drill to get it to go.
Okay.
That sounds like you don't get your sugar water mixed enough. It's as soon as you walk away from it, the crystals are starting to drop on the bottom of the jar.
I'm going to use a blender or a hand drill.
A hand drill would probably be your best thing. Your blender is only good for small batches, about 1.5 quart, 2 quarts, and that's basically emulsify oils in water, in sugar water. I guess you could do it in small batches, but you better get you 2 blenders. When one's cooking, the other one you can drain it.
Robbie, the paint blender or the paint mixer on a drill works great in a 5-gallon bucket.
They have 2 different kinds. One is a squirrel cage and the other one's a paddle. The paddle actually works better.
Okay. What do you do for yellow jackets?
I use Coke bottles with a little bit of A&W root beer in it. Well, root beer is flat. They go in it better than anything else. Coke, they don't seem to go in. Pepsi, they'll go in a little bit better than Coke, but root beer seems to be the trick. I've tried Orange Crush. I've tried just about everything. Root beer seems to do the thing. I don't know why.
Sugar?
No, it's not the sugar. I guess the smell of the root. It's sassafras.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Next up is Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis. You there? Dennis?
Yeah. I just make sure I'm looking around, see there's just more than one of us. Robbie, Robbie, I don't know what the exact measurements are, but I take a 5-gallon bucket, 25 pounds of sugar, and 2 gallons of water, and I mix it with that mixer, and it comes out thick, and it doesn't turn to crystal. It's about as thick as you'd want, so if that'll help you any. Works for me anyway.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Josh, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to know on your Facebook group if you would be able to post a thread on there of your mountain camp methods, what you originally started this beach hat out as your winter methods of keeping bees and stuff. Just to give me a couple of ideas and everybody else how to maybe overwinter your bees. I personally never heard of the mountain camp method. All I heard of was
We got 3 moderators in here, so what we could do is put one method and results they can do, and then, pick out the one you want. Each one is going to have a better on one thing than another.
Okay.
Every situation is going to be different, The dry sugar method is basically keeping from starving. The fondant is a little more effort to it. It might be a little longer lasting. Brick method of putting a block in there, it might be longer lasting, but if the bees don't come up, they don't break cluster, they're not going to get to it. So personally, I like to reserve my honey, and I like honey to feed back the bees for emergency. That's my number one. Sugar is just to keep them alive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would just like to see some tried and true methods for ideas for what I might be able to do in the future.
We've used the honey bear with putting honey back, but if you don't have honey, you can take sugar. You can take a sprayer, spray your frame, an empty frame next to your cluster, get it damp, and just take plain old sugar and put it on and just rub your hand back and forth, or take a bee brush, and the moisture will hold it in the cells. It's just another way of feeding your bees. What way works for you or works for somebody else might be totally different, but it just gives you a different option.
Okay. That's all I needed.
Okay. All right. Patricia, go ahead.
Yeah, for Josh, for the different methods, if you ask that question on Facebook, we'll try to address it there, because some of it also, Don's winter is a little warmer than the guy in Maine's winter. And so some of the winter things are relevant to where your location is as to if it works better or whatever. And the guy in Maine, they have been keeping bees in Greenland for the last 6 years. And they did it as an experiment, and they are taking the beehives into a building in the winter, and it's online. So if you look up Greenland bees, it's a wonderful thing about how they brought them back. And I've actually got some honey from Greenland. My son-in-law went looking for rocks a couple of years ago and brought me some. I wanted to ask Don, one of the biggest problems that I've noticed people have is their bees die early spring. from starvation and they don't recognize it. And I think that's something good to talk about, because people look, they lift the lid, they see bees, they think everything's okay, and a week later the bees have starved to death because the bees were looking out wondering where the food was. And a lot of people don't recognize those signs of starvation in early spring.
I think I've done a video about 10 or 15 years. You can see the stages of a hive that, or a nuke that has starved out. And the typical thing is you'll find them with their heads stuck in the hive, the cells. That's, you know, and then if they've died from moisture and starvation, they'll be head first in there and they'll be moldy looking.
Right, but how do you avoid it?
Best thing to do is make sure you have enough honey before the winter starts coming in, before the weather starts dropping. You got until about 40 degrees maximum. That, you know, I would say stay above 55. If your hive is light at 55, put the feed to them. I don't care if it's 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 sugar, or put honey on them and get it on them quick, because they only going to have a short period of time to get reserves around that cluster. Because once the temperature gets down, they just don't work as well and they don't move the resources. And if your cluster is too small going into winter with a screen bottom board or too much draft in there, I've seen them in a 5-inch cluster and honey right next to them, and they will not move sideways. They'll move up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So main thing is check your stores out. Make sure what your hive looks like.
Right, and then go back and check again in January maybe to
Right.
make sure they haven't eaten it all.
If nothing else, just get down on your knees and put your ear up against the hive and tap out a little bit. You'll hear them humming in there. No hum, bad news.
I have a stethoscope for checking them.
Well, that costs money.
No, it was given to me.
Get you a glass and put it like that against the hive.
All right. I think that is all the questions for tonight then. We're right at 9, it looks like. So I think we will call it a night.
Okay.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
And just get on Facebook and post those questions there, and we got moderators can answer them too. So there's no question that you shouldn't be asking out there. If you think it's dumb, ask it anyhow, because we all been down that road. You have to learn. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Appreciate everybody showing up. Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.